welcome to Electrify, the podcast where we talk all things electrical with your host, Paul Abernathy, the guru of electrical code himself. Now let's sit back and relax and let's get boogieing, baby. Yeah.
What up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Electrify. My name is Paul Abernathy, your host, and welcome to the podcast. Dude, we got a great episode for you today. For those out there that have been listening, I will tell you a little update. We are kicking out millions of downloads in our podcasts. As you know, I have multiple podcasts. The Let's Ask Paul. We have the Electrify. We have Master the NEC podcast. So again, all these podcasts are kicking out. We're doing great. And I think that if it's not for you listeners, man, we wouldn't have anything to do with these podcasts. And I've been doing podcasts before they were even podcasts. I'm talking all the way back in 2004 when I was just uploading these things to my AOL space and then sharing them with people and trying to get in the search engines. Back then, it was a lot easier than it is today. And started gathering a following and then grew it from there to where I joined 1,000 Mics in about 2007. And I was with that until about 2011 when I hooked up with Spreaker, and Spreaker gave me 10 years of complimentary premium service in order to build my podcast. So I thank you, Spreaker, for helping make it possible. And of course, then they got acquired by Spotify, and well, the rest is history. We are cranking out the downloads, and I appreciate everybody that listens to every one of our podcasts. We definitely appreciate you very much. All right. Today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about a topic that, comes up quite a bit, and I see this in forums. Most people know I did a little bit of an experiment. I guess that's what you'd call it. A little bit of an experiment on TikTok. Still don't understand that platform, but I'll reserve judgment. I've kind of said enough what I thought about it, but it's kind of hard because that's like a 3-minute platform, right? You've got to convey something, especially if you're an educator. I've got to express something in 3 minutes, and then you got to worry about the snarky comments that people make because they want to pound their chest. Heads up to all those people. I don't share your comments. They're not automatic. Just because you comment doesn't mean other people will see them. Chances are I'm going to delete it. And if you're really an a-hole, I'll just block you anyway, because I really don't care much for that platform. But at any rate, it's kind of a neat experiment. But one of the topics that came up in there was when we were talking about the National Electrical Code, and for everybody out there who says, I don't do the minimums, I always go above code, and all those type of things. So I thought that would be a great topic to have today on this episode, is to talk a little bit about above or going beyond the bare minimums, and when you may not, and when it's not the right thing to do, and all those type of things. So, it's going to be one of those things where you're either going to agree or disagree with positions, and especially maybe a position that I might have on it, because there are a lot of people that say, I never do the bare minimum. Understanding, though, that the National Electrical Code itself, and I know there's people out there, literally, people out there that, you hear the crickets? There are people out there that literally hate the fact that I say it's a minimum safety standard. And the reason they say this is usually because they go, well, there's some maximum rules in the code. And I'm like, no, you're not getting it. You're not putting together the pieces of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you can't install something and fall below, right? Fall below the National Electrical Code. It's a minimum. Now, granted, okay, everybody's quick to remind me, Paul, well, it has to be adopted in my state, and it might be amended by jurisdiction. And I get all that. Don't you think that I wouldn't know that? Because I do serve on code panels. I've been doing this for over 30 years. I get all that. You're not going to give me an epiphany in your comments. I know all this. But what we're trying to say is, look, when it comes to, like, if I serve as expert witness and there's an accident, the first thing that I'm going to look at is to determine whether or not you met the minimum safety standard. Because the moment that you fall below the NEC, that is where the tentacles come out. That is where you start to get into that prancing position, because I'm ready to jump on it, right? And, it could be, when you're an expert witness, it could be the smallest little thing, but I'm going to make that such a big deal, because it is a big deal. It is a big deal because the reason we have this National Electrical Code, and arguably, I've obviously made a career on the National Electrical Code. It's a document that I hold near and dear. I'm a part of the development process, as any of you can be, if you want to submit public inputs and then do public comments and be a part of it. And we'll talk about all that today in this podcast. But I want to talk about the minimums. So if you do an installation, and this is personally between you and your customer, if you do an installation and you do it based on the NEC, then it is the most minimally safest achieved installation that you can do. And it's still okay. It's still safe. Now, it seems that a lot of electricians out there, at that point, when I say that, something happens. They get that acid reflux comes up, and they start to get that bad taste in their mouth, and they start spitting that venom. I never do the minimums. I always go above code. No, you don't. No, you don't. Majority of what you do when you're running NMB through bored holes and you're putting nail plates, and you don't, the majority of what you do is to meet code, right? So for those that say they go above code, it's perfectly okay. You can go above code. But let me ask you a question. If I had a 2x4 and I bored a hole through it, and I bored it right through the middle, okay? And so from the edge of the bored hole to the edge of the framing member, it was easily 1.25 inches on both sides. So I wouldn't need nail plates, right? So the concept of you saying, but I don't do the minimums, I always go above minimums. So you would put a nail plate on it even if it's not even less than 1.25 inches. So that's what you sound like to somebody like me. That's what you sound like. Because there are times when you can clearly go above code, and that's a choice you're making. It may be because of your business. It may be because that's just how you do things. It may be what you want to do for your customer. It might be that you go above code or above the minimums because it actually made it an easier installation for some reason. And maybe the piece of equipment you use, it's above what you needed to do, but it made it easier, and that's why you do it, right? So the notion of going above code is a choice that you have to make, and that's a very personal choice that every electrician has to make. I have no problem installing something to the NEC because I know that majority of your install is going to be to the NEC, and it is a minimum safety standard. Now, there are people out there that hate when I say that, but they cannot bring up a good argument against that statement, because when we say minimum, it means that you can't fall below the standards set by this document. And anything that you do above it is going above the minimums. And that's perfectly fine. That's a choice, again, you're making between you and your customer. And hopefully you're charging for it, right? But in this market today, everybody's frugal about pricing. They want multiple prices. They want to make sure they're getting a good deal. Don't be overcharged. All those type of things, it doesn't behoove you to do a bunch of stuff over the minimum. But like I said, the majority of what you do anyway, whether you want to admit it or not, meets the minimum code. So when I hear somebody say, I never do the minimum, yes, you do. You do. Every time you do work, you're doing the minimum. It's just certain aspects of it that you may go above the minimum. And that's perfectly fine. I would never tell anybody they can't do that. My job as an educator is not to teach above what the code says. That's something I'll leave to vocational schools, and I'm teaching code. And so when I teach code, I'm teaching what this National Electrical Code says. Now, you can develop what you want to do beyond code, but I'm teaching you that. That's my job. That's my goal, is to teach you the minimums. Why? Because I know that if you at least install it in conformance with the NEC, that you're going to be okay. If something happens and you follow the code and something happens because Murphy's Law, things will happen, then you can defend it, right? You can defend yourself. You have a something to stand behind you, right? So that's why we say it's a minimum standard. And you can always go above it, right? But that's between you and your customer, okay? So the next thing that usually when we're talking about the National Electrical Code is talking about electrical inspectors, right? And people know my position on this. I have been electrical inspector. I have been an electrical plans examiner. I have been a head of jurisdictions, both from an engineering perspective as well as from a code supervisor. And you can go look that up. My profile, actually, by the way, is on my website. All you got to do is go all the way to the right to the miscellaneous, and you can see my profile and a sample of different things that I've done. And that's just to kind of establish the fact that when we talk about inspectors, and I go on these forums like the TikTok forums or Facebook forums, and I see some of the comments, and I kind of wonder sometimes with these things, because you got to remember, what's that old saying? If you haven't walked in somebody else's shoes, you would never know how they feel. And I have been an inspector. I have had E1, E2, and E3 certification from ICC. I've had state-specific certification in Virginia from the I can't remember what it's called, the Department of, no, not DPOR, that's my licenses. But these are through for the municipality requirements. I can't remember what they call them. But they do their own certifications. So I had all that. I also had to train inspectors. And one of the first things that I did to my inspectors when they came in, and I'll never forget this little conversation I had with an inspector, probably one of the best inspectors I ever had, and ended up being his mentor, and he ended up taking my job at the city of Richmond when I left. And that was a gentleman named Jeff Harris. Now, Jeff Harris would never listen to a podcast. He would certainly never listen to any of these. And he's retired now. And he knows how I feel about him. I saw something in Jeff from the first day I met him. And Jeff is 10 years my senior, right? He's retired. I'm not ready for retirement yet. But he came from the electrical industry, and he came to be an electrical inspector. And it's not funny. I shouldn't say it's funny. He wasn't hired because he was the first choice. So we hired this guy who came in, and he wanted to be an electrical inspector, and he was with the union and everything like that. And he had some connections to be, get first on the list. So he did the interview, and he did good. More than what we'd expect. Coming into a municipality. We were unique because in my jurisdiction in Virginia, we wanted you to be a master. That's not a requirement. That's not a prerequisite. Again, that's specific to jurisdictions. They might have that rule. In our jurisdiction in the city of Richmond, you had to be a master. And that was set up by a gentleman named Pat Murphy, who's no longer with us. But that was his rule. And so we hired this guy, and he went out on the first day, and I went out with him to show them what our expectation is for the electrical inspector, what we expected. And he went around with me, and we moved pretty quickly because at that time we were doing 10 to 15 inspections a day, sometimes more, depending on what was needed. And we moved pretty quickly, and we had to get it because, again, our customer base, the citizens, the builders, the contractors in the municipality, they expected this real timely service. At least that's what we have established. So when you establish something like that, people expect it. So we went around all day, and by that afternoon, he was breathing really heavy. And I said, "Dude, are you okay?" He said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I just have some indigestion." I'm like, "Okay." And so I was the head guy. And we had a supervisor there, which he wasn't my supervisor, but he was a supervisor over the inspectors. I was over all of them. But he had it was his responsibility to keep this guy in line. He's new, his first day, And he told him, you be in tomorrow, time to be in and all that. And the guy said, okay. So we thought everything was fine. And I talked to Jerry and I said, this guy moves a little slow, but I'm sure he'll pick it up and he'll get better. He looked like he got winded pretty much at the end of the day, and I kind of worked him pretty hard. And Jerry said, yeah, you did. Kind of worked him pretty hard for his first day, but, whatever. So the next day comes around. I think that was a Monday. Tuesday comes around in the morning when we're setting up the schedule for his inspectors to go out, and he was going to go with us, go out again and get his training. Because, you wear a different hat, and I'll explain that with Jeff, but he never showed up for work. And I'm like, well, Jerry, you need to give him a call. You need to see what's going on. Did he quit? He didn't say anything. He didn't do anything. So Jerry calls him and gets a voicemail. And Jerry leaves what I would say probably is kind of a nasty voicemail. He says, we don't do that here. We expect you to be on time and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, we didn't hear anything. And I would say Jerry was pretty harsh, but, hey, it was it's a policy. We had a policy. Anyway, come to find out the guy died not long after he got back from our inspection and finishing for the day. And his wife got that voicemail, and she called the city, and she was just irate. Of course, Jerry didn't know that. None of us knew. And so the thing that kept running around City Hall was that Paul done killed an inspector. Paul done killed an inspector. Totally not the case. The dude had a heart condition and nobody knew it. So anyway, he dies. He was there one day. And we had the next choice was Jeff. I didn't know Jeff, but we called Jeff, called him in. And then it was kind of, you feel bad when anybody passes, but and you don't want to say it's like meant to be, because that sounds bad. But when Jeff came in and I interviewed him, we sat with him, I hit it off right with Jeff. I knew that he was the one, right? And, you have that feeling for certain people. And I knew that he was the one. And so I gave him so much dedicated attention. But one of the things that I said to him right off the bat was, Jeff, and I had my hat on, and I turned my hat around, and I said, see, Jeff, this is the hat you wear as an electrician. And I turned that hat around, and I said, you see this hat, Jeff? He goes, yeah. I said, this is the hat that you have to wear as an inspector. As an inspector, I don't want you to be forcing people to do things because somebody may have forced you to do something. We're not going to propagate that chain of ignorance. I want you to approve things that are in conformance to the National Electrical Code. I do not want you to impose your own will on anybody. You can assist, you can give advice, you can give your opinion, but you're not there to design it. You're not there to install it. You're not there to expect it. You're there to inspect it. Give it the green tag. And if you can't find a code violation in the code, and every one of my inspectors had to give code references. That's not the case everywhere, but I just didn't think it was right. I don't believe you can fail somebody unless you tell them why you're failing them. Because if you can't find out why if you're looking at it and you're doing the inspection and you don't know why you're failing them, then how could you fail them? It's not right. So I said, if you can't find a code reference, but in your gut you think it's wrong, give me a call. Call a supervisor. But if you can't find it, and he was very astute in the code. In fact, come to find out, he used to attend all of my seminars that I used to do around Virginia, around that area, because I helped write the continuing ed requirement for the state of Virginia. So he used to come to all of them, and I had no idea. But he was very knowledgeable, and he got much better as he became an inspector, and then ultimately ended up taking my job as the plans examiner for the city and all that. As I moved up to engineering and moved on to Alexandria, Virginia, Jeff took over that role, and it couldn't have been a better guy because he was eat up with code no different than I was. But I wanted to make it clear, and I used to make it clear to all inspectors, we're just here to make sure that it's compliant. If an electrician wants to go above the code, that's fine. I have no problem with it. And I encourage it in many cases. I think it's great. But there is a problem with some people that are less knowledgeable when they think they're going above code and they end up doing full circle and they actually make something more hazardous. And that can happen very quickly when it comes to grounding and bonding. When it comes to Article 250, things can go south very quickly, creating objectionable currents when sometimes you think more is better and it's not. And so that's why I tell people, if you're learning the code and you already got your license and you're just out in the field, one of the best programs or courses that you can ever take is a grounding and bonding course, whether it's one of my courses, our Fast Tracks Purple, or wherever you take it. Make sure that you put it in your bucket list to take a good grounding and bonding course. Now, I've been blessed to serve on Code Panel 5. I've said this over and over again, that serving on Code Panel 5 and with those individuals that serve on that panel, I'm going to tell you right now, there is no better code panel. I mean, literally, the individuals that are on there, and I obviously will leave off people, but I'm just saying, there's individuals on there like Scott Harding and Dilip, and Christine Porter, and Greg Steinman, and I mean, really, it's just Trevor Bowman and Bromer, and one of the great minds on there is Dr. Paul Dombrowski, just an amazing guy that serves on that committee. And I know I'm going to leave people out, but then that's Phil Simmons, is on there. I mean, these are just people that you can tell they have a passion, and for me to be on that panel and be able to give what I can give to it, give my perspective of it, but also to sit there and take it in, it's fun for me. And we don't get paid to be on these committees. We volunteer to do this, and we have to be nominated, and we have to get appointed from NFPA through the nomination process and from our association that we represent. But to me, Code Panel 5 is the epitome of a code panel that I always wanted to be on. And grounding and bonding is such deeply rooted in me that I think it is one of those programs that anybody should try to get a good, well-rounded understanding of grounding and bonding. Okay, so any people out there that already have their license, their masters, if you own a company, dude, get your guys in a good grounding and bonding course and just understand the fundamentals of grounding and bonding is so critical. Because if you're going to go above code, in the world of grounding and bonding, you can go south pretty darn quick, right? You can go south pretty darn quick. I ain't lying. Okay. So anyway, I went on this platform, this TikTok platform, and I just really don't really understand the platform that much because there seems to be the majority of people on there are haters anyway. They don't want to learn code. They think they already know code, yet nobody cites any code. It still amazes me that you're going to talk about code as if it's gospel and you don't even know what the code is. And so I don't share majority of the comments on there from my TikTok stuff. And I'll slowly do less and less on that platform because that's not my educational platform. My stuff is YouTube's and videos and most of the stuff I do, my videos, they're not even on those platforms. Like most all of my new videos aren't even on YouTube. They're on my own proprietary system. We call it Viddle. For those that are familiar with hearing me talk about it, we call it Viddle. It's a program that I invested in a couple years ago, and we've developed it, and it keeps all of our videos and so that they can't be shared with anybody. So it's kind of copyright protects them. And you can get them through our app. We have an app. People don't know that, but we have an app that's available. You can download it from our website, or you can go to a special page that we set up called www.neccat.com. Now, a lot of people say, is that NEC for the National Electrical Code? It is not. It's actually the National Electrical Collective, which is where we're starting to place its server where I'm starting to place all electrical specific content in case something happened to me or the company or all of my recordings, that it's going to be in this repository. And so only select people know about it, will know how to access it, that type of thing. So it's a National Electrical Collective, and that's what it means. So nechat.com is the portal for downloading our free mobile app. Now, what can you do in that app? You can communicate with me. You can join the Sparky Hub, which is our social media platform. You can watch our videos on there. You can listen to podcasts on there. Pretty cool that you can do that. You can, what else can you do on there? There's other stuff you can do on there. Oh, you can do little courses. We have some mobile-friendly courses on there. So all of it's on there. The app's free. But again, we're in business to make money. So there's people out there that say, Paul, do you really do anything for free? Yeah, we do. But at the end of the day, look, I'm not trying to fool anybody. I want to get paid from what I do. And so I sell videos, I sell podcasts, I sell courses. I teach you to pass the exam. I am even there on Wednesday nights to hold your hand if you need that expert explanation of something you're not understanding in our Fast Tracks program. I'm right there for you, right? So, I don't do things for free. But when I say I help people, dude, I answer every call ask anybody, ask any of my students or ask anybody. I answer my calls. I respond to emails. If you text me, I text you back. If you send something through Let's Ask Paul, the portal over on paulabernathy.com, I respond via podcast or even an email answering your questions. So for somebody to say that, it's kind of hurts you a little bit because you do give back. But I've never said that I do everything for free. That's not me. So if you're looking for that guy who's willing to do everything for free, then God bless you. Go find that person. I am not that person. I'm a business person. Okay, you pay for my knowledge. Okay, there's other people that have the knowledge to give. So I would say seek them out. You know what I'm saying? All right, so let's wrap up this show. I want to get back to the topic, and that was going above code. Now, local jurisdictions can amend or modify the code, but they're done on a state level. That's not what an inspector does. The inspector is not there to make you do more than what the minimum is. If they do, they're wrong. They shouldn't be doing that. That's not what their charged mission is. But you could have some local amendments, and you could have some local rules that change the NEC. And at the end of the day, you've got to follow the jurisdiction. But I'll give you a great example of why you got to be careful for that. You ready? And this is an example that I tell people all the time, whether I'm doing a seminar or training, and we're talking about this subject. Talk about Texas. So the state of Texas is on the 2020 NEC. Okay, it's 2022 now. So in 2022, they're on the 2020 edition of the NEC. Okay, when the 2023 comes out at the end of this year, Texas will be one of the first that will adopt the 2023 NEC with probably 0 amendments. And that's what we'd rather see. I don't want to see any amendments. I'm an anti-amendment. Okay. I understand in some places in the country you need to have amendments to adjust the code, which is maybe not relevant to your area based on temperatures or wherever exposure. Okay, whatever, you do you, but I'm against amendments. Okay, so in 2020, the 2023 code will be adopted by, in Texas. Austin will adopt it for Texas, but every little jurisdiction is allowed to be on a lesser or an earlier edition. Or a later edition, I probably should say, later edition. So they could be on the 2020 still. They could choose to still be on the 2017. So let me give you an example. Now, I'm in McKinney, Texas. So the state could go to 2023, but McKinney could say, we want to stay on 2020. And so when you're doing work in that jurisdiction, then they're going to be inspecting to the 2020 edition of the National Electrical Code. And that sounds fair, right? Remembering, though, that people always say, well, the inspector's always right. The inspector's always right. If he's approved something, that it makes it okay. No, that does not make it okay. That means that they approved it and you can move on with your day. Okay. But everybody is liable because you're responsible for doing it right. They're going to say that they didn't look at all of it because there are time constraints and from what they saw looked good and they passed it. But just because an inspector passes something doesn't remove your potential liability. And I could cite court case after court case that proves that. In fact, I did a TikTok on that. So, but getting back to Texas. So if I was in McKinney and I did something on the 2020 code, let's say that the state is on 2023 and I do something that is compliant with 2020, but it is not compliant with 2023. And let's say somebody gets hurt, heaven forbid. And, electricity, it can happen. So they could come after me and take my license because I did not do it in accordance with the state. And the state doesn't care what the jurisdiction on. If it ends up in the hands of the people that issue the licenses, and that's done through the state, they're going to expect it to be done in accordance with 2023. They do not care what that municipality did. You hear me? They do not care what was adopted by that municipality. If it goes and it's an issue of you being charged by the state, and you can go to any state and look at any fines or things that they've done to contractors, it would not matter what the jurisdiction, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's the state that issues your license, not the jurisdiction. Now, granted, that's different in some places, okay? Pennsylvania, it runs differently. Nevada, it runs differently. New Jersey areas, some things may run differently. New York's, differently. So I can't obviously cover every scenario, but I'm giving you the best I can to explain to you that you as an electrical contractor, one, have to be very aware that you're doing it right. Okay? Now, chances are that's an extreme example where you did something in the 2020 and then the 2023 is in the state, and then you do something happens and then they come after you. But it can happen because they're going to be observing the 2023, but you installed it to the 2020. Now, that's probably not so bad because there's probably not a significant change that causes a problem, but there are other jurisdictions that actually lag even further behind. So you could have a municipality in the state of Texas that is still on the, could be on the 2014 still, or they might be on the 2017. And so there might have been significant changes with expansion of GFCI and AFCIs and other things where somebody gets hurt. And then what happens is an expert witness steps in, and if I'm one of those, I am looking for whatever you did that would not be in compliance with the state. And what's the adopted or what is the addition of the code that has been ratified for that state, and that's what they're observing, okay? And so if I find that you did something that would be not allowed under the 2023, but you did it under the 2017, then I'm going to make sure that comes out. I'm sorry, that's just how it works. So it's not true for when everybody says that the AHJs have all of the say. You just have to be really careful. If you're going to do whatever the AHJ says, and you know it's wrong, and you know that it's not code, but the AHJ still wants you to do something, then I encourage you to go over that AHJ's head. It's not worth you risking your license. It's not. It's your livelihood. This is what you do for a living. The AHJ, again, God bless them. I teach a lot of them. But they have such a caseload, and they're learning too. And in many jurisdictions, they're not even previous electricians. There's most places it's not even a prerequisite. You take the state of Virginia, check this. Not Virginia, Texas. Check this out. The IAEI, International Association of Electrical Inspectors, is located in Richardson, Texas. However, the state of Texas does not have a licensing requirement for electrical inspectors. So out in the county, like Collin County, out in the actual county, you can do electrical work and there is no inspections at all because they don't have a licensing for electrical inspectors for the state. It's very much done by municipalities. So it's the wild, wild west. And this happens in a lot of locations. If you're doing work outside of a jurisdiction, a city, okay, an incorporated city, you're doing out in the county. And so people that have equipment that fail in the city, they just save it and use it in the county. How do I know this? Because I've been hired by people to do third-party inspections out in the county and turn down people. And the electrician goes, well, I couldn't use it in the city, so I tried to use it out here. And I'm like, well, it didn't work there. It ain't going to work here. And they seem to think that because there's no inspections or no mandate for inspections, that they don't have to follow the National Electrical Code. And that's not true because the state supersedes everything. So you still have to install it. And it's kind of the honor system out in the country that you need to install it so that it meets the minimum safety standard. Because if something happens, then you're going to be in trouble as an electrical contractor just because you could get away with it. Just because you could get away with it, you should always do what's right. And so in this case, I never wanted to, for convenience or speediness or whatever, I never wanted to cut corners simply because I didn't want to risk my license. I didn't want to do something else. I was always been involved in electrical. Always. So cutting corners was never my thing. Now, did it always mean I was the best price? Nope. Did it mean I won every job? Nope. Did it mean that every customer was happy when I had to charge them for something? Nope. But I did it. So, when I hear people say, well, you probably, or, I hate the one that I hear that says you teach because you can no longer do. Dude, I'm 50 some years old. I don't know how you are, but I've paid my dues. I worked in the field and I don't care to do it anymore. It's too hot. It's hard work. God bless you that do it. We need you. We need more skilled laborers. People can handle it a lot easier today. They're much better shape. This seems like younger. They don't have the capacity to listen, but they're in much better shape than when we were. You take my brother. My brother is still out in the field. He's still working our electrical company that we started together back, 30 years ago. He's still doing it. And he'll tell me all the time, he says, dude, I don't want, he's in his 60s now, 60, I guess. He goes, some days I can't even lift my arms over my head, sore the shoulders from holding up raceways and things, I'm like, dude, I get it. I got out of that when I could get out of it and realized that I'm better at teaching code. It just was, I had more joy at it. So, at the end of the day, to each his own. I don't care. Those people say some stuff that just makes them feel better or whatnot. If you want to do above code, you do you. And I'm all for it. As long as you meet the minimum standard, I have no problem with you exceeding it. I really don't. And I encourage it. Shine, be brilliant, and do all those things. Go above if you want to go above it. Just remember, there is an element where you can go too far. And I don't want you to go too far where you basically turn around and you do this 180 and you go from whereas you think it's safe and now it's unsafe because your lack of knowledge. That's why I do what I do. So you do you go above code. There are places for it. But just realize that the majority of the work that you do, whether you like it or not, you want to think that you're always above the minimum, whether you like it or not. Just like my board hole example. I'm pretty sure you're not putting nail plates on all board holes that are compliant with 1 1/4 inches from the edge of the board hole to the side of the frame of the wood member. I guarantee you don't just throw nail plates on it for nothing, okay? So that's the minimum code, right? You do it every day. You choose to go above the minimums in certain things, right? A great example of this is also the comments that we got on the TikTok about the anti-short bushings for MC. That's a kind of funny debate when you're going above code because, anti-short bushings are not required, okay? They're in 320.40 for AC cable. They're in UL4 for AC cable, but there's nothing in UL 1569. I get it. People want to use the anti-short bushings for MC, and again, as a wire and cable guy, if it adds one little extra protection to my conductors, then go for it. Okay, because that's one last issue that I'm going to get a call on the phone, somebody saying my conductors are damaged. You do you, and I'm okay with it. But my point is you're not required to do it. That's a choice. You're making that choice. And if you want to do that, I support you 100%. All my job is to tell you that I teach code. So you need to understand that I teach the minimums. I'm not here to teach you beyond the minimum. I'm teaching you what this book says. That's it. And if you follow what I say, then you're going to have a relatively safe installation. Okay? You're going to meet the scope of the NEC. And that's what it's all about. And that's what I'm all about. A choice to go above code or above the minimum is a choice that you make. It's between you and your customer. And by God, I hope you charge for it because you're doing that of your own free will. Inspectors should never make you go above the code. And if they do, that's just a bad inspector. Okay? Just, I hope they retire because that's just not the way to be a real good inspector. Really. So anyway, hope you got something out of that and enjoyed the podcast. Until next time, folks, stay safe. God bless. Until the next episode of Electrify.
You've been listening to Electrify with Paul Abernathy, the guru of electrical code. Thanks for listening, and hopefully you check out future podcasts over at electricianlive.com. Until next time, keep it real, baby. Yeah.